welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan and these are the headlines tonight. As we look at the latest coronavirus data, the highest cases are coming from Maharashtra, Delhi and Tamil Nadu. On day 22 of the lockdown, 1,118 new cases have come up across the country, but that's been less than Tuesday. The death rate is at just over 3%. India now has 170 corona hotspots. We'll show those hotspots to you in just a few minutes. How the lockdown will slowly open up after the 20th of this month. Agriculture, rural industry, e-commerce, all of that will be allowed. So will plumbers and electricians, but only in those areas which have little or no cases. The Gujarat Chief Minister goes into self-quarantine for a week after coming into contact with an MLA who later tested positive for the coronavirus. The police say that rumours are causing chaos among migrants across India. We talk to migrant voices in different states and all of them are saying the same thing. Please let us go home. But first, let's take a look at the data that's come from the Health Ministry today on the latest number of coronavirus cases and where we actually stand. Now, in the last 24 hours, there have been 1,118 new cases, which is about 350 less than Tuesday's figure. Tuesday, remember, saw about 1,463 cases, which was the biggest single-day spike. There have also been 39 deaths in the last 24 hours, taking the total number of dead to just under 400. Now, to step up the fight against the pandemic, India's districts are now being classified into three categories. There are hotspots districts, which report a large number of cases. There are non-hotspot districts, which are recording fewer cases, and green zones, which have not reported fresh cases for some time. So, if you see there on the different states that are coming up, Delhi, for instance, if we can go back to Delhi, about two-thirds of the districts in Delhi fit into the red zone category. 63% of Delhi is considered a red zone category because they have more than 15 cases in that particular area. And the remaining one-third have up to 15 cases. That's the 38% or so. Going back to Andhra Pradesh, a little over half of that state has red zone level districts. The rest again have less than 15 cases. And there is also no district here which has 0 cases. So that's as far as Delhi and Andhra Pradesh are concerned. Then you look at Tamil Nadu, which has a total of over 1,200 cases, and a little over 40% of those fall under the red zone, and the rest have less than 15 cases. And like Delhi and Andhra, there are no districts here with 0 cases either. Looking at Rajasthan, a quarter of the districts in the state fit into the red zone criteria. That means they have more than 15 cases. But even though the state ranks 4th in the total number of cases, a quarter of the districts have 0 cases. So that's good to see as far as Rajasthan is concerned. You can actually see green on that map, which means it's coronavirus free. Then there is Maharashtra, which has the most number of cases, and it is rapidly heading towards the 3,000 mark. Again, 61% less than 15 cases. 22% of districts are in the red zone, and you do have 17% of districts in Maharashtra that fall under the green zone with no cases. But remember, it is the city of Mumbai, India's financial capital, which falls in that red zone of 22%. Now, let's compare the new cases and the states who have the most cases at the moment. That's Maharashtra, Delhi and Tamil Nadu. So just to get a sense of where these states are headed, our data team crunched the numbers and compared it with the latest all-India average growth rate. Earlier today, Maharashtra shot up by 350 cases in a 24-hour period, which was almost a third of the overall India cases reported today. And this graphic shows that while India's current average growth rate is 11%, Maharashtra and Delhi are both higher at 15 and 14%. However, when you look at Tamil Nadu, while it has the third highest number of cases, its average growth at 8% is actually significantly lower than the national average. Well, a number of guidelines were announced by the government today on what could happen after the 20th of April, after which there are certain areas which will begin to open up. There are lots of industries, the rural economy in particular, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, all of them will be allowed to operate in those zones that have little or no cases. Sanket Upadhyay joining us for more on that. Sanket, tell us more about, what exactly will then get going in about a week from now.
So lockdown 1.0 is now over and lockdown 2.0 has been pressed into service till the 3rd of May. But there is a basic difference. There will be relaxations after assessment. So this is the major difference, effective post-April the 20th. Now, who will carry out this assessment? This assessment will be done by states, UTs, district administration, which means anyone but the central government is going to decide which area will be free to operate under normal circumstances, or some functions will be allowed. I'll explain what all is allowed in just a short moment from now. Hotspots are going to be very, very closely monitored. This assessment will be done by the 20th of April. Lockdown elsewhere is going to continue till the 3rd of May. That is the areas that are not going to see any form of relaxation. Now let's quickly tell you what can be allowed if the state government or the district administration so deems fit. So agricultural and related activities can be allowed. Select industrial activities can be allowed. Digital economy is already up and running. Transportation of goods, both essential and non-essential, and I think this is the most important, because there was a line of trucks of essential and non-essential commodities which was lined up all across the length and breadth of this country, a huge cause of concern. So that will get moving hopefully post the 20th. Agricultural marketing, manufacture, distribution, retail of fertilizers, all in the green zones, or the zones that are allowed or opened by the various state governments. Fisheries, supply of milk, tea, coffee, rubber plantation, food processing, construction of roads, irrigation projects, buildings as well as industrial projects in rural areas. Now this is extremely significant, because this could kickstart an absolutely stalled rural economy in this country. Works under Manrega, especially irrigation and water conservation works, will also open up if the government so deems fit, the state governments that is. Again, very, very significant for the rural economy. Manufacturing, other industrial establishments, access control in special economic zones, manufacture of IT hardware, coal, mineral, oil production. The list is long. I'll let it play out in the graphics. In the meanwhile, let's quickly talk about what is going to stay shut irrespective. Even if there are some relaxations, till the 3rd of May, no, you cannot travel by air or by rail or by road. Educational and training institutions are going to stay shut. Industrial and commercial activities in the red zone are going to remain shut. You cannot go to a restaurant and have a meal. You cannot go to a hotel and stay. However, the hotels are going to be open for essential services. Cinema halls shut, theatres shut, shopping complex shut, and certainly you can't go to a temple to pray or to any religious institute, and definitely no congregation.
All right, Sanket, pretty comprehensively detailed guidelines there. Let's hope that more and more areas are able to open up after the 20th of April. Fingers crossed for that one. Of course, the big focus also has been on the lakhs and lakhs of migrants from around the country who are stuck in different cities. Many of them did try to go back home. We've been reporting on their plight, but so many from different parts of the country are still stuck in big cities. They don't have money. In many cases, they don't have proper access to food and shelter. And all they are telling us from every single city that we have reported from is that they want to go home. They are hungry, they are restless, and they are desperate to go back home.
Brajesh Kumar, with his newlywed wife, is staying in Mumbai's Markhund slums in an 8x8 room. His family is in the Maharajganj district of Uttar Pradesh. He was earning about 100-150 rupees a day repairing dish antennas and cables. But now there is no work and there is no money.
मेरी माँ का भी तबीयत बहुत ख़राब है, वो हार्ट का प्रॉब्लम है, वो भी दवा हार्ट का प्रॉब्लम है। वो बोल रही थी कि आ जाओ मेरा दवा करा दो, तो अभी 25 तारीख का टिकट था मैम, कैंसिल हो गया लॉकडाउन की वजह से।
He's not alone. Santosh Pandey is a rickshaw driver who stays in Mumbai's Ghatkopar area with 6 other family members in one room. 3 days ago, a friend of his helped him with rice and dal, but now just 100 grams remains. Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray has tried to calm migrants, appealing to them to remain where they are, promising that food will get to them.
Many such migrants are now waiting to go back to their villages. With the lockdown being extended, they are running out of cash and now fear that before Corona, hunger might take their lives.
In Kerala's Thiruvananthapuram, Dijon Mondal, a migrant worker, has managed to buy 5 kgs of rice today with the money he and some of his friends could manage to pool in. There are 80 of them in this building with no jobs, no money, and for now, all of them just get one meal a day.
3 टाइम का खाना हम लोग 1 टाइम खाता है।
सच है ये? तो आप लोग एक ही टाइम खाते हो?
हम लोग को क्या है, पैसा नहीं है हम लोग का। अभी हम लोग बचना चाहिए हम लोग को। अभी 3 टाइम खाना खाता है हम लोग। अगर मान लो कि 3 टाइम खाना खाता है, अभी 1 टाइम खाना खाता है।
This school is just one of the 18,800 migrant labor camps being run by the state government across Kerala. You can see a television here which is being provided for their entertainment. There's on-campus medical facilities as well as food provisions that they cook according to their own tastes. The government claims that around 3.3 lakh migrant workers are being provided facilities like this across the state.
But even for them, the only worry, their families and their unattended fields back home during this harvest season.
आप लोगों को खाना दिया जा रहा है यहाँ पे?
खाना दे रहा है। खाने का प्रॉब्लम नहीं, लेकिन हम लोग
खाने का प्रॉब्लम है?
नहीं, खाने का प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। खाना दे रहा है, वो बात नहीं है। लेकिन हम लोग का क्या प्रॉब्लम है? हम लोग का गाँव जाना है। गाँव ट्रेन के लिए कुछ बात करना चाहिए था। लॉकडाउन होना था, होने दे रहे, लेकिन वो 2-4 दिन के लिए 2-1 दिन ट्रेन देगा तो वो बात अच्छा हो।
A demand even Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan has raised. In Telangana, nearly 500 migrant workers from a construction site went on to the streets of Hyderabad yesterday, demanding that they be sent home or arrangements be made so that they stay safe and don't go hungry.
सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग है, उसका कोई मतलब नहीं है। एक आदमी में एक रूम में 10 आदमी, 8 आदमी, 5 आदमी ऐसे करके रखता है। यहाँ पे एक टंकी भरा हुआ टंकी रहता है, उसमें पानी नहीं रहता है।
Another group of 150 migrant workers who started off on a 900-kilometer journey back to Srikakulam was stopped at Uppal on the outskirts of Hyderabad. When stopped, they complained that they had no earnings and no money to even pay rent.
Minister Talasani Srinivas Yadav and others convinced and counselled these migrants from Srikakulam, telling them that they would get all the support that they need here and that even their house rents would not be demanded for, at least not this month. The most pathetic of the stories was of a migrant from Bihar who in fact committed suicide over the weekend. All his money had got exhausted and he had asked his family in Bihar to send him more. But before they could reach out, he had ended his life, lonely and alone in an alien city. In Hyderabad, with camera person Nagraju, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
And now for a story that had a very sad beginning, but there was intervention later that hopefully will ensure a positive ending. The pictures on your screen that we're about to show you is what we found on the banks of the Yamuna earlier today. Migrant workers rummaging through piles of rotten bananas, hoping to get something to eat. That's how desperate the situation is. These are migrants from Bihar and UP who've been stuck in Delhi after the lockdown. As the report came out, the Delhi government took action and these migrants have now been shifted to a local shelter.
क्या करेंगे? भूखे मर रहे हैं।
और ये अलीगढ़ गांव में आकर
पानी पीते में लठ मार दिया था। देखो अच्छा, ये चूना लगा रखा, मैं पानी में कूद गया था।
खाना नहीं खाया,
पानी पीते में
खाना नहीं खाया। सर आपका क्या नाम है?
रमेश
जी कहाँ के रहने वाले हैं?
मैं बिहार का रहने वाला।
आप यहीं फंसे हुए हैं, क्या करते हैं आप?
ये मार्केट में धक्का लगाता हूँ, मजदूरी काम।
मजदूरी अब सब बंद हो गया, यहाँ हैं आप, ये सड़े हुए केले में ढूंढ रहे हैं कि कोई केला मिल जाए तो थोड़ा सा राहत।
हाँ, क्या करे, भूख लगी है तो क्या करे सर।
खाना नहीं मिल रहा है यहाँ?
खाना कहाँ मिल रहा है?
लोग वहाँ ज़्यादा हो गए हैं और हमने आज बात किया है जो उस एरिया के डीसी हैं और डीसी दोनों मिल करके इन सब लोगों को हम स्कूल्स को कन्वर्ट किए हैं शेल्टर के तौर पर, वहाँ पे हम सबको शिफ्ट कर रहे हैं.
Well, joining us now is perhaps the most authoritative voice in India on rural affairs, on farmer issues, on the agricultural economy. Mr. P. Sainath, the founding editor of the People's Archive, is with us on NDTV this evening. Mr. Sainath, thanks so much for being with us. Can I first ask you, what do you think of these relaxations, possible relaxations after the 20th of April that the government has announced in the guidelines today, particularly with a focus to reviving agriculture and the rural economy?
I think there is very little clarity in how this is going to pan out. I think, you're putting out things saying social distancing norms must be observed in the MNREGA. What about in agriculture? You think it's going to be possible at all to do that? A heck of a lot of good sentiment statements are being made. We really do not have any idea of how this is going to work out. You have no idea of what number of days you're going to get in the NREGA, none of that. But Nidhi, speaking of agriculture, there are a couple of things that I really want to say. I really want to tell you and make an appeal. I'm reiterating this appeal that I made 2 hours after Nirmala Sitharaman's package. I think we have to move and persuade every farmer in this country to shift entirely to food crop in the Kharif season. I don't think there is a sense in the government, in the establishment, of how seriously things are spinning out of control. Okay, now first of all, if they actually distribute those estimated 60 million tons of supposedly surplus or buffer stock, you're going to run through that pretty fast. One of the things you're learning in these last few weeks is how fragile the equilibrium of the poor people in this country is and how close to the edge they are. Yeah. Okay, today, I just heard what you were saying about yesterday's Telangana demonstration. Today, food distribution volunteers were physically attacked in Telangana, okay? Because the numbers of people demanding food and rations is incredibly larger than the number of packets being produced or distributed. I'm telling you this very seriously. We need to, the government shows no sign of planning for it. You'll start agricultural operations. What are you going to grow? Yeah.
You're saying it can't be business as usual. It can't be cash crops. You have to move to food crops. And you're saying that this is now for the rest of the year, I presume.
Absolutely. The thing is, let's say you grow cash crops. Please note that all the such cash crops as have been grown in the Rabi, watermelons, they're rotting. They're rotting. And tell me, after a few months in which there is, very well as I do, that there's going to be a huge crash in income and consumption, and you're going to have a lot of cash crop lying around to be bought by whom, to be sold by whom, to be consumed by whom. I think that one of the reasons I'm asking for a shift to food crop in the Kharif season, not the least amongst those reasons, is the food security of the millions of small marginal farmers and farm laborers. What will they eat if they grow cash crops that they're unable to sell? I believe it's pretty hard to digest cotton.
Absolutely. You really put that very bluntly, Mr. Sainath. And then that comes to the next question, which I have, because as you're talking to us, we have these pictures of desperate migrant laborers, others, the poor, lining up, they just want to go home, and they're not getting adequate even food supplies at many of these government shelters. What I don't understand, and I think what many of us don't understand, is when we have excess food grain in our godowns, why has it been so difficult to get this food to people? And you're smiling because you know the irony of this.
Yeah, well, this irony has been around for about 20 years, right? A little more than that. Yeah, and governments are simply not willing. They think they're seeing a deadly precedent in feeding the poor people. It's incredible that even at this moment, they're not willing to make an announcement of, we will distribute the food and we will reach it to where people are. Let me tell you this, the next clanging and banging of pots and pans will signal food riots, not solidarity.
So you're warning about the possibility of food riots if the government doesn't urgently step in, intervene, urge farmers to move to food crops and actually give a comprehensive package to the poor. Right now, it's clearly not enough.
Absolutely. And the second thing is, there are very fragile sections of the population, and the migrant laborers are one. Nidhi, let's also, while introspecting about what went wrong and how it could have been handled differently, let's also look at introspect about our own performance as a media. In the last 2 weeks, you've seen more about migrant laborers in the press, in the media, in the television than you probably have in the past 2 decades. Most of us were quite happy to have these people in their miserable conditions. Our carpenters from Rajasthan, our construction laborers from Odisha, our electricians from Uttar Pradesh and painters from East Uttar Pradesh, plumbers from Ganjam, they were all working here in our cities and things were fine. They were fine for us. When the crisis comes, the miserable conditions, because crisis does not affect people equally, the miserable conditions in which they are, and is that has led to their panicking and leaving, especially because of a very ill-advised announcement on March 25th, the way it was put. Total panic took over and people ran. And they've taken a 3-way hit. They've been stopped. I mean, 1, they're walking huge distances. 2, they're stopped at the state borders. 3, they are being rejected at their own villages in many cases by barricades coming up to prevent them from entering the village. But it's not just migrant laborers. And can you recall, Nidhi, in the last 10 years since the 2011 census, can you recall a single expert panel discussion on the fact that that census indicated that we had seen in the preceding decade the greatest migrations in India's independent history? Can you recall one such focused discussion?
No, you're right.
The census of 2011 also showed us that the URGD, the urban-rural growth differential, which is a proxy for demographers use that as a proxy, a ready reckoner for migrations, was its highest in 40 years. We had all this. We never bothered to discuss it. Instead, we were discussing smart cities. What a stupid idea that was, right? You were going to cities that are now unable to cater to 25% of their population in infrastructure and services. We're going to build little Valhallas and enclaves and Shangri-Las, which would service 2% of the existing population of the city, like say the Indore smart city. We kept on this line without ever looking at the people, the workforce that makes your country tick. And it's not just migrant labor.
Eye off the ball clearly, and we're, I think, looking at the consequences of that now when this pandemic is playing out the way that it is. And you are clearly giving us a warning sign that a catastrophe could really follow. So finally, Mr. Sainath, if I could ask you, if there was, you've already given one suggestion, an appeal to the government that you need to urgently get farmers to shift to food crops. What is the other appeal that you would make to them today? The other 1 or 2 things that you feel that the government needs to do immediately in the short term to tide over the next few months?
There are several things. One is immediately regularize the millions of sanitation workers we have in this country. They used to be government servants before neoliberalism ruled the world. They used to be government servants. Corporation after corporation, municipality after municipality closed these jobs, privatized it, outsourced it to contractors who then hired the same people at lower wages and no benefits. And Nidhi, look, when did we're so discussing about the masks and the gloves and the shoes. These millions of sanitation workers who go down into your sewers never had gloves, shoes, masks, anything, and we never gave a damn about it. Regularize them immediately, add 5,000 rupees a month to their salaries. They are your frontline fighters in the cities. Second, the health of your children, the future and nutrition of your children and the health of them and their mothers lies in the hands of those incredible women of the Anganwadis and Ashas. What sort of payments do these people get? 3,000 rupees and 1,500 for a helper and some ridiculous incentive for birth and deliveries and stuff like that. Make them regular government employees on par with the sanitation workers who will be taken over and given 5,000 rupees. If you are not willing to do this, I think we are really living in a fanciful world. Third, immediately make the migrants who are stranded, etc. They're stranded in nowhere land. We had the opportunity all along, that you could have declared all those schools that you closed, all those colleges that you closed, all those wedding halls and community halls, they could immediately have been converted into migrant shelters and shelters for the homeless, right? We could have done that. We didn't do it. Some states are trying to do it. It's on a very small scale. Most of the schools and colleges are not occupied by that. We should, the thing was that these workers, oh, by the way, let's also note that instead of trying to lock down 1.3 billion people, you could simply, when the first cases came up, have shut down all the airports. You would have had a finite and very small number of people to track and trace, which could have been done. But what else can be done right now? I'm saying with the farmers, immediately the remaining operations of the Rabi, you have to take it, you have to pick up their produce, reach it. Your own reports, I saw the report of NDTV from, I think, Uttar Pradesh yesterday. That was a wonderful report on how it was how it's happening on the ground.
I think these are very important suggestions from you, Mr. Sainath, and what you've listed out, very concrete things that need to be done, that have to be done immediately. I really appreciate that you've taken out time to give some constructive suggestions.
One last thing that I do want
go ahead.
to say.
Go ahead.
One, I'm again appealing for introspection in the upper middle classes, our audiences, your audiences, my audiences, and the elite as a whole. Yeah, I've said it after every major calamity. You watch how agonized we are about how people die, how untroubled we are by how they live. We never bothered about the living conditions. I'm trying to say this because you said, can it be business as usual? I find it perversely entertaining that we are so much more comfortable visualizing the end of the world than ending the ridiculous economic system that we have followed for 28 years. No one is talking about the end of the mythical free market. But we are willing to talk about the end of humanity and how pandemics can depopulate the planet and everything else.
Let's remember where this pandemic started, especially for us. It was all the high flyers, all of us who have the privilege of flying to international destinations, business class, and coming back. It started with us. And it is India's poor that are probably going to bear the brunt of this at the end of the day. Mr. Sainath, thank you so much, very much indeed, for joining us on that important story tonight. We've been focusing on different states on this program day after day, and why some states have done better than others. And one of those states that seems to have done pretty well, all things considered, has been Karnataka. Now let's take a look at why that is the case and how that is the case. If we could just bring up those graphics on our screens. If you look at how the cases have been doubling, what the rate of growth actually is, well, they've been doubling at every 12 days as far as Karnataka is concerned. In fact, it doesn't even figure in this particular graphic of the top 10 states in India who have coronavirus cases. So the Karnataka model has actually been a pretty successful one. And if you see how that line has moved, it has steadily moved downwards with a couple of peaks in between. So Karnataka really seems to have done pretty well, all things considered. I'm joined by Dr. Sudhakar K, the Minister for Medical Education of the Government of Karnataka. Dr. Sudhakar, tell us more about how Karnataka has had this success. It's great to see both Karnataka and Kerala really bring down the number of cases so dramatically.
First of all, I feel the credit should go to the political willingness and the will of the Honorable Chief Minister and all the ministers of the Cabinet. Secondly, it should go to the frontline, our Corona warriors. And importantly, our bureaucracy who are tirelessly working for this. And in the last but not the least, the people of Karnataka being so sensitive, responsible, they have responded to the requirement. you know, we were prepared way ahead than the other states. We started screening right in both the international airports of Bangalore and Mangalore. That was our first step of taking way back in January 21st. Since then, whoever were, tested, screened, who were positive, and their all contacts, their primary and secondary contacts were quarantined from that day itself. So from March 3rd onwards, we were screening all the international passengers from all the countries. You know that Bangalore being a Silicon city, we have over 2 million people who are working alone in IT sector besides other industries. So that was the first step that what we did, and we closed down all our schools, educational institutions, colleges,
sure. But are you expecting
malls,
some opening up now after the
theaters.
20th? Are you expecting to be able to open up certain areas on the 20th as per the guidelines issued by the government today?
No, absolutely. See, now about 11 districts in Karnataka, specifically if I have to say Bangalore and Mysore, these are the two hot zones or the hot spots where the numbers are like 80 from Bangalore and almost 50 to 55 in Mysore. These are the two big districts which has more in number, like more than one third of the number from the entire Karnataka's positive cases are from Bangalore and Mysore. Besides, there are about 6 to 7 districts where we have around 8 to 10 cases in those districts. Even there we are limited to some areas only, not to the entire district. So we have categorized, as you rightly said, the hot zones, the red zones, the orange zones and the green zones. Even after the 20th, after the dilution or the staggering release from the lockdown, so we would like to ensure that all these hot zones will be completely sealed till the 3rd May 3rd, and ensure that the essential commodities will reach in those areas to their home delivery.
So hopefully you will be able to relax the restrictions in a lot of areas. Finally, Dr. Sudhakar, just one quick question on testing. Are you going to be stepping up testing and making it more aggressive even now? Because even though Karnataka seems to have done well, obviously you don't want to take your eye off the ball. We still have a long way to go. So are you also looking to increase testing?
Absolutely, we can't be complacent about the let me tell you, let entire country not be complacent, not just Karnataka. This is a new virus. We need to be very, very careful about this. We need to test more. The 4 T's, testing, tracking, treatment protocols, that what we have to do, it's a very must. See, from 2 to 3 labs that we had initially, we have stepped up to 16 labs today. Apart from this, we are eyeing to set up 2 labs in every district. So that will take up to 60 labs, and all these are all the real-time PCR, which are accurate test results. Apart from this, we have ordered 1,25,000 kits, which are the rapid test kits, which may be more than 80% accuracy. But even after the result from there, we will again, for a confirmation, we will go back to the real-time PCR.
So good to hear that, Dr. Sudhakar, that you're going to be ramping up testing.
Continuous.
Yeah. Good to hear that you'll be ramping up testing and hopefully being able to relax restrictions in those areas with few or no cases after the 20th. So good luck. I hope Karnataka continues on this path. Thank you very much, Dr. Sudhakar, for joining us.
There should be a very important balance between the life and the livelihood.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we need to ensure the livelihood of people is not hampered, especially the agriculture, the agrarian sector, and the people who are working in MSME and small-time migration labours.
Thank you very much.
At the same time, we need to care for their lives.
Thank you, Dr. Sudhakar, very much for joining us. And in fact, before we move on to the next section, I would like to again go back to the overall India graphics and where we stand today. As I said, we've had just over 1,100 cases in the last 24 hours, but that's been less than what was reported on Tuesday. So that gives us some comfort on a day-to-day basis, I guess. We have Dr. Sudarshan Balal, the chairman of Manipal Hospitals, joining us. Dr. Rajesh Malhotra, the chief of the COVID facility at the Trauma Center at AIIMS, is also going to be joining us. Dr. Balal, just wanted to get a sense from you about how you see India's overall trajectory at this time. How are we doing?
Good evening, Ms. Razdar, and to the fellow panelists and the Honorable Minister. Thank you for having me here. I must compliment the Government of India and the people of India on the trajectory that we are on. We have done far, far better than the rest of the world. If you look at the number of cases, we only have 12,000 infections, which is 10 per million. And the death rate is 1 for 3 million in the entire country. And the Karnataka has done even better, where the death rate is 1 in 5 million. This is far, far better than the rest of the world, even assuming that we are not testing enough and maybe we are missing out some asymptomatic cases. But we have not seen any hospital that I am aware of which has seen scenes like what's happened in Italy, Spain, and New York. So overall, thanks to the people of the country, the government, and the health sector in general, who have sort of kept the COVID virus pandemic under control in India. And I do hope the extended lockdown and the measures that we are taking will further slow down the trajectory, and maybe we will come out of this pandemic very soon.
Right.
No pandemic lasts forever, and hopefully this also will end very soon.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that it's good to hear doctors sounding optimistic as well, because often one puts on the TV or looks at newspapers and you get a little upset with all the negativity. So as a doctor, it's good to hear you say that. But Dr. Rajesh Malhotra, just a quick question to you on how we need to utilize this lockdown period for the maximum benefit of all of us. So therefore, do you think the most important thing in the next 3 weeks will be to expand testing so that we have a clear idea of where this has gone?
So that's absolutely right. When we buy time with the lockout, there are quite a few things which can be done. Not only that we are preventing the spread and we are trying to flatten the curve, it gives us time to do more testing. It gives us time to contain the clusters. It also gives us time to develop our own PPE kits, our own diagnostic kits. All this time is very valuable because it's the time is of essence. If you lose the crucial time, the thing will get out of your hand. On the contrary, this is the only way to keep things in check. And I personally think that if we adhere to these lockdown and the social distancing, we will be able to flatten the curve, and at the same time we'll be better equipped to fight this menace in terms of our wherewithal and our infrastructure. For example, while we were waiting, we have been at our institute able to standardize the techniques for sterilizing the PPEs. So if required, we can reuse them. So all this time that we are not overwhelmed, we can use this time to build up our infrastructure and contain the epidemic.
Dr. Malhotra, how is life going to change for us though after the lockdown ends? Because it will end someday. It can't sustain forever. But I guess all of us have to live our lives a bit differently, at least until a vaccine comes.
Absolutely correct. I always think to start with very basic things. I do hope that I'll see less people spitting on the road. I do think that we will start using masks. As in Japanese society, if you go, you see everybody wearing a mask. I think we are going to come out much wiser with this, and there will be permanent changes in our lifestyle. And for me, as a trauma center chief, I can tell you I've seen a precipitous fall in the trauma cases. The accident cases have gone down. We do get the fall from the height. Yeah, but the people are still falling from the roof, but maybe they are going upstairs to sort of pass some time. But then, it is a concern that when the lockdown is open and there are a whole lot of people who are waiting to be treated for diseases other than COVID, it is going to stress the healthcare facilities. That's my concern.
All right. Well, I wish we had more time tonight, but thank you to both of you for giving us a quick perspective on where we are as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And both of you agree we can use this lockdown period to strengthen our medical facilities, our health facilities, our testing and other infrastructure. And I think both of you are saying essentially that we can beat this, we can fight this. Thank you very much to both of you for being with us.
Thank you, Ms. Rasta.
Well, as we head into the next effectively 3 weeks of this lockdown, one of the big concerns obviously has been the impact on India's economy. We've seen various projections of what India's GDP could look like in the coming financial year. We have seen projections from 0% up to 1.5% from all major world financial institutions. So just how much of a setback will this actually do to our economy that was already in some degree of distress before the pandemic broke out? And is the government actually doing enough to address this crisis? Joining us on NDTV now is India's former Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, you have actually been advocating very strongly for a strict lockdown. You were pushing for that right from the beginning. But at the same time, you believe that the government needs to do much more to help the economy. I think the question is that does the centre really have the money to announce a kind of an aid package that, say, Western governments have done, like Germany and others?
It has the money. I have written about it. We can help the government locate the money. It's there in the central government's expenditure budget for 2020-21, 30 lakh crore rupees. The total state budgets on the expenditure side is a little over 40 lakh crore rupees. Is anyone seriously suggesting that out of 70 lakh crore rupees, and we are only on the April 15th, we haven't spent a pie out of that, maybe just a few lakhs. We can't find 5 to 6 lakh crore rupees to restart and revive the economy. I can identify heads under which you can save money, you can increase the borrowing, and if you are very conservative, you can even monetize part of the fiscal deficit. There are many, many ways to raise the money. The money is there. I don't know why the government is fighting shy of releasing the money.
How concerned are you about the growth projections that are coming in from whether it is the IMF, which is talking about a 1.5% GDP growth rate for India this year, which, by the way, appears to be...
Your voice is faint.
If you can hear me,
Your
1.5...
audio has to improve.
Okay, we'll just try and fix that.
Practically, I can't hear you.
Is that any better?
Yeah, this is slightly better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How concerned are you about the growth projections from world bodies like the IMF? Though India, by all accounts, seems to be... I mean, even in these depressing times, it might actually end up doing better than other world economies. Should we take any comfort in that?
Forget growth. First quarter will have zero growth. The second quarter, if agriculture and services pick up, you might get 1 or 1.5% growth. It's only in the third quarter that industry, especially manufacturing, will begin to yield results. Therefore, why be obsessed with growth this year? The whole world is going into a recession. We'll be lucky if we can keep our head above the water. And I think we should be happy with 2 or 3% growth for the whole year.
Happy with just 2 or 3% growth for the whole year. That's interesting. Can I ask you what you think of the government's guidelines issued today for what could open up after the 20th of April in those areas which do not have coronavirus cases or have very few of them? That includes allowing agriculture to restart, rural industry and some other manufacturing and industrial units. Do you think that this is the right way to do it, slowly, gradually?
Yes, I welcome the guidelines. I can't second guess each guideline. This must be done by a lot of people putting their head together. But broadly, I welcome the guidelines. I welcome the restarting of agriculture. I welcome the restarting of small services. I welcome the restarting of industries in rural areas. But we'll have to really look at the map of India, exclude the coronavirus-affected districts and the hotspots and the containment zones, and find out what part of India will benefit from these guidelines. in my view, even if, say, 1/2 of India, in terms of area, benefits from these guidelines, I think that's a good beginning, and I compliment the government for the guidelines.
The Prime Minister said in his address yesterday that it was he made an appeal to companies not to fire people at this difficult time. But many have lamented that was not followed up by any concrete package from the government to help particularly small and medium businesses, Mr. Chidambaram, that honestly don't have the money even to pay salaries, even for next month. Now, again, are you worried that we could see a lot of layoffs, especially in small and medium companies, even bigger companies maybe?
So the Prime Minister's intent was correct, but a mere appeal, a mere exhortation won't help. He should have backed it up with a strict warning that if he finds that there are layoffs or retrenchments, he will pass a law. Singapore has passed a law. Singapore has passed a law, an emergency law saying nobody will be fired and everybody will be kept in his job. Now, I assume that since the lockdown started on March 25, and in some states a couple of days earlier, the bulk of the March salaries would have been paid on the first week of April. I'm assuming so. Maybe I'm wrong. But April salaries are important. I think April salaries have to be paid, and the banks must be instructed to lend to industry the working capital necessary to pay the salaries for April. By that time, we'll have a clearer picture by the end of April or May 3. But if this is not backed by the threat of a law, or even a law, I'm afraid a large-scale retrenchment and layoffs will take place, and that will be a complete disaster.
But what do those companies do that don't have the money to pay salaries? I mean, if you're not being able to, say, sell your services, you're not making money, how are you going to pay money?
See, I think to assume that in the first month after the lockdown they'll run out of working capital or cash is an extreme assumption. Yes, maybe 10-20% would have run out of cash, but the others would still have cash to pay a month's salary. But as I said, banks must be clearly instructed to lend to working capital and to pay salaries for the month of March and April. And let's take a review in May.
What would you advise the government, Mr. Chidambaram, on the issue of migrant workers? From all over the country, we have voices every day, including today, of migrant workers desperate to go back home. They are, in really, really bad shape in many parts of the country. Now, I was just reading how the government of India is repatriating Pakistani nationals who've been stuck here and taking them back home. And someone rightly remarked, well, why can't we take our own people back home if we can repatriate nationals of other countries? Is there a way you think that can be done and still keep the sanctity of the lockdown?
We are talking about very different numbers. The Pakistani nationals will number a few hundred, but we are talking about migrant workers running into lakhs. I got a number like 20 lakh migrant workers who are trying to move, and maybe 6 lakh migrant workers actually walked after March 26th or so. I think the way the government was unprepared to handle the migrant workers issue and the chaos and panic that set in for a few days is a blot. It will be a blot forever on the way the government handled it. What they should have done first is put money in the accounts of these workers before the lockdown, or at least on the day the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, he should have said, please stay back where you are. We're going to put money into your bank account in 2 or 3 days. Without a job, without assurance of work, and without money, how does somebody remain in the place where he is migrated to? He can't pay the rent, he can't buy food, he can't buy milk for his children. How does he stay there? Therefore, he decides to walk back to his village. That should have been anticipated, and that should have been planned for. They should have put money. Now, that is done now, you can't undo that. But I've been pleading for the last several days. Now, approach a scheduler approach. Put money in the hands of every poor family. there are 26 crore poor families in this country, Assume that 50% want some kind of help, or say 40% want some kind of help. Even if you take the outer limit of 13 crore families, give 5,000 rupees per family, it will cost you 65,000 crore rupees. Is the expenditure secretary so helpless that he can't find 65,000 crore rupees or 40,000 crore rupees or 45,000 crore rupees out of a budget of 30 lakh crore rupees?
So you're saying that you're not in favor of actually physically moving them back to their homes because you don't think that's practical, but putting more money in their hands. Yeah. And therefore, do you find it ironic that the government is still embarking on that Parliament Vista plan that's going to cost some 20,000 something crores?
That's absurd. The only consolation is they won't be able to spend all the 20,000 crore this year. But they will still spend a few hundred crores. They should scrap it immediately. What does it matter if the Central Vista, if it has to be redeveloped at all, is redeveloped after 2 years? If the current Central Vista has survived for over 100 years, why can't it survive for another 2 years? I think these are vanity projects. I would have scrapped it. But even if the Prime Minister does not wish to scrap it, he should postpone it by at least 2 or 3 years. And every 100 crore that is saved is a help to take care of the poor. And I think the immediate thing that the government should do is put money in the hands of the poor. The lists are available with the state governments. You have the BPL list, you have the ration card list, you have the Ujjwala list, you have the Jan Arogya list, you have the Maganrega list. Put all these lists together, draw up a master list. It's all seeded with Aadhaar and put money there.
All right. Well, Mr. Chidambaram, thank you for joining us on NDTV this evening, giving us some perspective and some suggestions also to the government on what they can do. You've welcomed the steps that they've taken today with trying to slowly reopen the economy. But as you've warned, we should be prepared for some tough days ahead and be happy with even 2% growth if that is what it will be. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.